Now to the aftermath of that train derailment in Ohio, where local residents are very reluctant to accept official advice that it's safe to return home.
I wonder why. I've seen so many people be like, dude, it's not that big of a deal, including even like Alan Fisher, who I love. I think he does a great job because it's like about trains and he knows too much about trains, I think. People being like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Yes, because of derailments being such, as I've talked about, such a normal part. No, he didn't say it, but he liked the tweet about it I saw, I think. Anyway, I don't think he personally thinks it's not that big of a deal. But I think that if you cover trains all the time, you know that derailments happen. Thousands of derailments happen a year. Some of those derailments are not that big of a deal. It's just like a train literally getting off the, a train slightly getting off track. You know what I mean? Not like a major one. Okay, for those of you who don't know. And there are more devastating ones that even occur and have gone unnoticed in the past. Overall, though, it's still fucking awful. It is a devastating environmental catastrophe. It's just that once you hit the TikTok button on any kind of story, the story itself turns into something even much larger, where people are talking about how like this is, Chernobyl style. People are fucking dying. No, what's going to end up happening is more monotonous, more boring, more banal. However, in a weird way, more devastating. You will see cancer clusters 10 years down the line. You know what I mean? That's it. That's what you're going to see. The truth is, unfortunately, always significantly more boring. I'm begging leftists to stop making a fool of yourself by showing how much you don't understand trains, especially freight, when talking about NS derailment. I understand you didn't pay attention to the news and are now freaking out about a train go kaboom 5 days later, but please don't talk about train air brakes unless you do a mild amount of research. Also, yes, I'm making an explainer video about it within the week. Yeah, I knew. I as soon as I saw this tweet, I knew he was gonna pop off on this. Train nerds mad we're calling their 150-year-old tech shitty. Anyway. More cancer for big cancer to scam people into funding big cancer CEOs. Okay. Would you consider yourself a train head? No. I merely am a train observer and an appreciator. I would never call myself a train head because there is so much more to know about trains that I do not know. I would never say that. Anyway, so what I was saying is this is a devastating situation. It's a devastating situation just like, the average... It's a devastating situation that's more boring than the way people are now sensationalizing it. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's still fucked up. And I think that the more interesting component of this is that how this is like, how the lack of reaction, the lack of media coverage overall are surrounding it, and the lack of interest and the way that the company originally fucking behaved is consistent with how capitalism works. You know what I mean? I think that is the more interesting story than like the chemicals are going to start melting people's brains in East Palestine or whatever the fuck people are saying. Because like I said, the unfortunate reality is, and I've said this literally since day one, this is a big deal. It's a big story. But more so because of the the ineptitude built into the system, more so because of like all the lobbying efforts to ensure that there's not enough safety mechanisms inside of the not enough safety checks because they're cutting corners. It's a story about union busting. It's a story about like not listening to the workers. It's a story about workers knowing more about the fucking process, the logistics, than like the way executives treat it. Okay? This is just another story about another town being absolutely fucking destroyed by profit-seeking demons and the government not doing anything about it. Okay?
It has been 12 days since the accident in East Palestine, since this sent this toxic plume of smoke into the air. Now people are complaining about health issues, and there are urgent questions about how their concerns.
The positive, though, from this, the positive thing, the one silver lining in this is that people are way more fucking focused on like chemical spills and shit that are happening in their neighborhoods now. And because it happens a lot, because it happens so fucking frequently, perhaps the one good thing that could come out of this is like maybe some more media coverage on this kind of thing and maybe a bill. Who knows?
Were handled. Lilia Luciano has the story.
I would be alert and concerned, but I think I would probably be back in my house.
That was Ohio Governor Mike DeWine's answer when he was asked whether he would move back home if he lived in East Palestine, Ohio, though he did offer caveats.
I think that
there was 1,000 train derailments last year. Yes, but not all train derailments are like this, for the record, okay? They're not like that. Not every train derailment is like, it leads with, ends up with a chemical spill and like a controlled demolition. Some of those train derailments are literally just a train slightly getting off track. Like that's not all of them are created equal. The issue, however, is that a lot of them do end up releasing contaminants into the environment. But I think probably Alan Fisher and the like getting frustrated about this story and the coverage on the story is understandable. The reason why it's understandable is because train derailments happen. Toxic chemicals sometimes get spilled, but they are a necessary. It is trains and train tracks in general are absolutely necessary to people's survival, to humanity's survival. And it is still a more cost-effective and more environmentally friendly way of doing logistics and transportation than anything else. So I think that Alan probably personally is afraid that people are just going to be anti-train now. Okay?
I would be drinking the bottled water.
There have been numerous reports in recent days of respiratory issues, burning eyes, and dead wildlife, including at least 3,500 confirmed dead.
Are really people saying we shouldn't have trains anymore over this? No, but I understand why people would deflect away from the main point of contention with train companies and like basically think that this is just, this is a problem that happens with trains in general.
Fish.
If you're new to the fucking story, if you're like oblivious to this kind of thing happening when it happens like 1,000 times a year, okay, maybe not to this degree, but like some version of this happens more than 1,000 times a year, you're gonna start being like, oh, this is fucked up. What the fuck? We gotta fix this. This shit sucks.
Killed by contamination.
We don't have any evidence of non-aquatic species suffering from the derailment.
5 of the train cars were carrying vinyl chloride, a highly combustible chemical linked to a higher risk of some kinds of cancers. Crews conducted a controlled release of the carcinogen to reduce the risk of an explosion.
When you have combustion or burning, you create all sorts of different byproducts. It's important to understand to cast a wide net when you're testing because you want to narrow out and rule out chemicals that could pose an acute health risk or linger around.
The governor and other officials lifted the town's evacuation order a week ago after health officials said air quality was back to acceptable levels and the city's main water supply, they said, was safe. 2 days after the evacuation order was lifted, the EPA said 3 additional hazardous chemicals were found on the derailed train cars.
This train apparently was not considered a high hazardous material train.
Yesterday, Governor DeWine revealed that since only 20 of the 150 cars contained hazardous materials, the company, citing federal law, was not required to notify the state of Ohio that the train had toxic chemicals on board.
Frankly, if this is true, and I'm told it's true, this is absurd.
For CBS Mornings, I'm Lilia Luciano.
That's crazy, man. You should look to your party about how they feel about fucking... You should ask other members in your party how they feel about deregulation.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Now, I don't know if they have to take additional precautions due to traveling with hazardous waste and whether or not those precautions were or were not taken. That's what I'm hearing about this case, is that they...
I think the people in charge of rolling back railroad safety regulations should see prison time. I know it won't happen, but what do you think? What do I think? You want to ask me what I think about what should happen to the railroad executives and what should happen to the people in Congress that allowed it to happen? I'll tell you what I think. I mean, they might not get everything right, but I think there's usually some really cool stuff that they do out there in China, especially as it pertains to like mishandling chemicals. I'm just saying, like 49 Ruhai logistics staff and government officials also were sentenced. And the highest sentence, and this might come as a surprise to you, was not given to the random guy that's in the bottom of the fucking rung, the worker, but instead the executive, a board member, accused of dereliction of duty, abuse of power, and accepting bribes and giving lesser punishments. All I'm saying is, you know, there are different methods of dealing with this sort of thing. I don't believe in capital punishment, but other parts of the story are pretty cool. 49 people being arrested and being charged with a crime. Yeah. There you go. I hope that was more informative on my position specifically as it pertains to what to do with executives. Yeah, it's not a death sentence. They give him a suspended death sentence, which is life in jail, for the record. For those of you who are like, what the fuck? A death sentence? That's crazy. I mean, they do actually sometimes execute. In that particular story, they did not. They just gave him a life sentence, perma jail.
That this is something that they were trying to cut money by transporting these things that are hazardous wastes in a way that perhaps maybe they shouldn't have been transported that way, or maybe the regulation should be different.
I don't know if it's even hazardous waste, though. I think it's just chemicals that we use in.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Why is it these two people talking about this issue, man? Why? I can't. She's not wrong. It isn't hazardous waste. It can sometimes feature hazardous waste, but She's not. Fuck. Oh my God. I hate this.
And plastic.
Oh, it's very hazardous. It's not waste.
Right.
Hazardous materials.
Right. It's very hazardous material. I don't think
it hits the
it's
ground.
like the byproduct. Yeah.
No, it's very dangerous materials.
But that's why there's this one kid, Nick Drum, who's been doing these amazing TikToks that I'm obsessed with because it's that he's like a.
I can't watch this. I can't. I really, I just like personally can't. I despise her. And Joe Rogan talking about this. Anyway. Do they watch the TikToks? Oh, the TikToks that we watched. Yeah, I know. We've seen all this. Okay, great. Anyway, they're gonna agree with us. I don't even know what she does. I don't know what she is famous for. I think she's like a comedian or something. I just can't, like, every time I listen to a Joe Rogan episode with her, I'm just like, I can't do it. I literally can't get over. I cannot get through a video with her and Joe together. Like, Joe's already so fucking stupid that, like, if his guest is also just as stupid, it's just like, she just sounds dumb. No. I don't know why Joe has her on so much too. It's just, I can't do it. Yeah, she's a centrist poster turned comedian after Joe had her on. Exactly. That's the worst thing Joe Rogan has done for comedy is like constantly make these fucking people turn to comedy as a career. She's funny, get over it, lol. Okay, just for that crime, everyone has to suffer. We're watching the rest of this video now.
This hasn't been getting.
So were these clouds? I mean, I also sent you a video that shows what it looks like in the area where these clouds are passing over, and it is horrific. It's apocalyptic. It's so terrible. There's a man who's on the ground who's screaming that these aren't storm clouds, that these are the clouds of this shit that they're burning from East Palestine. And he's freaking out, and, like, animals are dying, pets are dying, fish are dying in the rivers. The idea that they only evacuated a small area.
Yeah.
Like, you're talking about like miles and miles away from this.
Yeah.
Animals are dying. This is it. Look at this. Play this. Go full screen with this because it's so
These
great.
aren't storm clouds. This is the fucking shit that they burn off. The fucking shit they burn off in East Palestine. This is not fucking storm clouds.
Look at this.
I know.
Look at it. This is over Darlington.
Yeah.
And you can't back. Burn.
That's why they felt they had to burn it.
But it did explode, right? Didn't
No,
it catch
they
fire?
felt it was going to be a massive explosion.
And this would have happened anyway. But there's no other options.
And they like in one of that kid's TikToks later on, he talks about how
Even the Joe Rogan fans hate her. She's just like, I don't think she provides anything unique or new to the fucking story. I wonder who the actual guest was that canceled. Funny listening to Joe struggle to describe internet influence without being able to say influence because he knows he'd be talking about himself. He really loves this woman or owes her something. I turned it on for 5 minutes to see if she relapsed or became marginally funny. Neither. She had a baby and forgot to pay her taxes correctly. I just like, I think, and Joe Rogan's audience is like, half still Joe Rogan stans and half people who like now despise Joe Rogan. And she does unite a lot of those people. Like it's just like her entire thing, from what I understand, is just like being a centrist, right?
how they just buried it. And so people are saying they did this just to get the trains running again, basically, which again, the cynic in me wouldn't doubt, but I don't know. I just sent you a text from my editor, Joe Donatelli, who I loved from Playboy. He now lives in Ohio and does local news. And I will say local news has been great on this. they're actually reporting. And like he said to me, you have to be able to like muster the resources, fact check things. It isn't as fast as the internet where there's a void of information that gets filled. And he did a long thread about what they've learned at the local news station where he is. That's really good, and I recommend people go check it out because I think local news is actually pretty good on this. But some people in Ohio are saying they didn't even know about it. There's like people who you'll see online, they're like, I'm in Ohio and I didn't hear about this, but maybe they don't watch local news.
I mean, this is just, you know, like I had this conversation in this community a week ago when we first found out about this and talked about it. You know what I mean? So it's just like, that's why I skipped it.
Hey, time for
Ben Shapiro being weird as hell about childless women. Oh, God. I didn't want to hear from this. The thing that's going to happen, that is already happening, that I've talked about, is that, like, if liberals don't make this a political movement and utilize this as an opportunity and you know, talk about corporate greed and corruption and how it impacts even white neighborhoods that have been forgotten, then Republicans inevitably will turn this into some culture war thing. Marjorie Taylor Greene talked about it. Even Matt Walsh talked about it. Matt Walsh is now saying, you know, here, Matt Walsh is doing culture war shit. Okay. Tim Pool is suggesting that Antifa... Wait, what? Tim Pool suggesting Antifa derailed the train in East Palestine, calls his viewers to arm themselves in response?
Moore County, North Carolina in early December. Damaging equipment in what local authorities called...
I can't believe this is like a layup. It's good politics. It's good policy. And yet Democrats, unsurprisingly, are not utilizing this as an opportunity, even though they're in fucking charge. And they could technically do something. They could technically at least like talk about it. They could talk about like, fuck it, even say like Trump is the reason why this deregulation happened to begin with, and that we should reinstitute policies. You know what I mean? Anyway, I want to find the Matt Walsh tweet real quick, and I want to show you the Matt Walsh tweet about this as well, because like conservatives are very good at turning everything into a culture war narrative, and they're already doing it. In between Matt Walsh's like, you know, endless sea of tweets about how trans people need to be murdered on the streets or whatever, he decided to talk about he decided to talk about what happened here. Okay, what happened in East Palestine. And this is what his take was. It's too bad that the people in Ohio currently being poisoned by toxic fumes the government released into the air are mostly working class white people. They don't check any of the identity boxes necessary for the Biden administration to give a damn. Now, that is, of course, an idiotic fucking tweet, especially because environmental racism is a real thing, okay? And black and brown people, historically marginalized people, are impacted by environmental disasters even worse. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. This is a uniting factor. Class solidarity should be the conversation here. Okay? Yes, the government, capital owners, and their servants in the government do not care about working class people, whether they are white or black. If they're poor, they're poor. That's it. You think about Flint, Michigan, but another part of that story is places like Pittsburgh. Places where white people live also have contaminated lead poisoning or corroded materials that are in their piping that end up ruining the fucking water supply. Okay? So people don't understand this reality for some fucking weird reason.
The targeted attack that cut off power to more than 45,000 people. So how is it that we are suggesting it is accidental? We have...
It's not accidental. It is by design. It's corporate deregulation. It's corporate greed. That is the reason why this happened and will continue to happen.
Right here, direct statements in the press. Extremist groups did attack our power grid. What about the train? Remember when It's Going Down, the far-left extremist website, gave instructions on how to derail trains? And now trains are derailing, and they're full of chemicals, and they're exploding. Yeah, I don't know. Trains derail, man. They really do. So what can be said? Is it a network of terrorists that are attacking our grid? And maybe.
The attack that Tim is talking about was from right-wing and neo-Nazi extremists. He's equating Antifa with the attacks of right-wingers. Amazing bad faith piece of shit. Yeah, the power grid attacks were staged by right-wingers. The worst part about it is the DOJ has known that the fucking psychotic right-wing terrorists have been planning, plotting, and even openly stating that they're going to do power grid attacks. It's in my opinion, the media dropping the ball once again, not covering it as such. The article he's reading most likely fucking mentions that it's right-wingers, by the way, which he probably conveniently fucking didn't cover or didn't mention. When he says like it's a terrorist, he's talking about fucking right-wing terrorists. Here you go. Where the fuck's the article? God damn it. Reuters at this point is just like, FBI charges neo-Nazi leader in plot to attack the Baltimore power grid. An individual resembling and believed by the FBI to be the suspect, Sarah Clendaniel from Maryland, holding a rifle and clad in tactical gear, is seen in this undated image. It's so fucking insane. It's like these guys, even when it's their fans that they have whipped up into anger and who turn around and act out of like racial animosity that they learn from these right-wing fucking outlets, end up, following up on their psychotic, violent desires. It's still Antifa. It's still left-wing. It's still left-wing terrorism. Here is Chris Hayes talking about it and how Republicans are utilizing the Ohio train disaster to pursue culture wars and ignore solutions, which is so fucked up because it's the Republican attitude. It's neoliberal attitude and neoliberal policies that has caused this derailment. Okay, it's deregulation that has caused this derailment and will cause many more. And also, if you want to do this like this is because it's white people being attacked, as Matt Walsh said, no, that's not true. This kind of environmental catastrophe is a permanent fixture in black and brown neighborhoods.
This message is for the white people. And I'm just going to tell it to you straight because maybe someone else will. And
I already can tell I'm not going to like the framing of this because it still ends up framing black and brown working class individuals against white working class individuals. And I don't like that across the board. It's just like, this is a moment of solidarity. It's a moment where you recognize that like your class position still absolutely eviscerates your way of existence. I just don't. I don't know. I don't know what the purpose is. But let's see.
And
Maybe he
hopefully
will
you'll
express
understand,
solidarity.
but I want you to hear here first. East Palestine, I look at the demographics. For all intents and purposes, that's an all-white town.
Yeah, we should be letting class position trump racial scars in this case. This is unironically a case where your class position, which, by the way, racial violence, for those of you who don't understand this very basic fact, racial violence is doled out through class violence more often than individual acts of racism. Okay? Does individual acts of racism or does systemic racism often occur as a consequence of people, seeing someone being black and acting out of animosity? Absolutely. But the overwhelming majority of race-based violence, structural violence, is still dished out through the form of class violence. On the other side of it, right-wingers recognize this. Class still supersedes race in intersectionality. Okay? It does. That's why every fucking human being understands that Oprah, okay, despite being a black woman, is still in a more profoundly fortunate position as a billionaire than a white homeless person. Okay? It's so silly. When you talk about black existence and white existence, when you talk about black working class and white working class individuals, you need to look at the same class position, usually, in order to differentiate the additional hurdles that black people need to overcome. Extreme, but okay. Yeah, I'm using an extreme example because people constantly hit the class reductionist blah, blah, blah button. Okay? But ultimately, it's stupid.
Had that been Savannah, had that been New Orleans, we would be talking about this situation in the context of environmental racism. I'm going to say that one more time. If this was New Orleans, the situation that happened in East Palestine, a city that is 98% white, had that happened in New Orleans, we would be talking about it as an instance of environmental racism. This is exactly what we have meant when we say that everything we've had to deal with as a people is going to come back onto you. This is the example. This is it. And the fact that y'all not getting appropriate news coverage, isn't that pissing y'all off? And I'm sure the people of East Palestine are good working people. Y'all don't deserve this. Like, let's just look at it for what it is right now. Your air has been poisoned. You can't breathe in the air. Your water has been poisoned. You can't drink it. You can't clean with it. You can't cook with it. Your soil has been poisoned. Y'all can't grow food. Y'all can't grow food using that soil. Your soil, your water, you can't do anything. All of y'all have been displaced in the worst economic crisis since goddamn near the damn Great Depression. I'm angry for y'all. This could have been prevented, but people decided not to because of money. They decided in the great game of chess they're playing that y'all are the pawn and they're the king.
It's true. Exactly. It's a moment of solidarity, and it should come as a moment of recognition for white working class individuals. A moment of recognition for white working class individuals to understand that, like, This is exactly what happens to black people as a permanent fixture of their lives, just like it happens to white working class individuals as a permanent fixture of their lives as well, especially in the post-industrial, apocalyptic fucking middle America towns. You know what I mean? It's just like, this is a part of everyday existence. That's why I always fucking talk about how it's not just Flint, Michigan that suffers from lead poison pipes. It's so many American cities with white working class individuals as well. And it is the sacrifice zones, though, are predominantly black. Absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely. I mean, there is no way to cover this without talking about both of these issues, in my opinion, which is why I always talk about both of these issues.
$3,000. The company that's responsible for this is deciding to give y'all. That's not even a penny off the dollar. And the people who try.
I mean, even when I was talking about this, I brought this back around, like the $25,000 thing. What did it immediately remind me of? The $25,000, $5 per individual, fuck you money, immediately reminded me of the exact same thing that happened in Florida to Gregory Hill's, is it Gregory Vaughn Hill, and his execution in the hands of the police. And they turned around and offered his children like a cent. The city offered his children a cent. Like, it's fuck you money. It's shut the fuck up. It's not even shut the fuck up money. It's like, here's how little we care about you money. That's how it works.
Trying to talk about it from inside. The reporters there getting arrested. You've got to be kidding me. We all deserve better than.
They do this all the time. After PA gas well explosion, Chevron hands out gift certificates for free pizza. Yeah. There you go. Come on, man. Like, here. Oh, sorry. Did a gas well explode near your house? Don't worry. Don't worry, dude. You can avoid the top of the hour ad break with this $5 a month subscription that we're giving you. Don't worry. If you don't even have that, you at least have a Twitch Prime that you can use here. Or maybe you'll get gifted a sub if you're lucky. It's fuck you. It's like, it's not even restitution. It's not even hush money. Even hush money would be fucked up in this circumstance, all things considered. Your way of life being, uprooted. Crybaby Sav, thank you for the 5 gifted subs, allowing 5 people to no longer see the ads at the top of the hour. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. Pink Oleander, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. Sorry, were you being serious when you said they gave him a cent, or was that an exaggeration? No, it was not. When I talk about police brutality in the United States of America, a lot of things that you would consider as a normal, moral human being to be completely abhorrent are unfortunate realities, okay? This is real. This man was executed in his home, in his garage, by fucking cops. And his family was given $4 total. And they take a percentage of that, too. So they were getting mere pennies. Trinrek, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. Shush Jordan, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. Serpentin Axe, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. And Pink Oleander, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. Yeah. By the way, a lot of you don't realize this, but like, if you live near a military base, you're already living in this reality every day. Okay? There are places where the American military has quite literally fucking destroyed the delicate ecological structures. Okay? Hawaii being a great example, but it's not just Hawaii. Everywhere. You don't even fucking know about it. You don't even hear about it. You don't even think about it. Every place. PFAS exposure, a widespread problem for troops and families nationwide. Doris Brock's husband was diagnosed with stage 4 bladder and prostate cancer in 2015. His urologist asked him if he'd served in Vietnam. The cancer, the doctor said, was similar to what he'd seen in Vietnam veterans who'd been exposed to toxins like Agent Orange. The answer was no. But he served for 35 years as a member of the Air National Guard at Pease Air Force Base in New Hampshire, retiring as a Chief Master Sergeant. Doris Brock thought about all the chemicals he'd been exposed to during his career in aircraft maintenance. Trichloroethylene, PD680, different types of solvents, PFAS like the very back of my mind. They stand for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, a large group of human-made chemicals that are ubiquitous in manufacturing. By the way, PFAS contamination is not just in military bases, for the record. These are forever chemicals that we use in our, daily, home appliances and shit. Teflon. This is, it's not an accident that Americans are fucking so cancer-ridden. We've been doing this for a very long time. I don't even know how to describe it. This is everywhere. It's in everything. I don't know. We already have it. We're fucking cooked. There's not really much we can do about it. I don't know what else to even say. Yeah, Dark Waters is a great example of this where, PFAS contamination was so fucking rampant because of toxic runoff that destroyed the natural water supply in a particular neighborhood due to being, downstream from DuPont's manufacturing facilities that, they... It's not only cancer. A lot of the forever chemicals are estrogenic and cause hormonal issues all over the place. Did my thesis on it. No one cares. It's one of those things that's just considered unavoidable at this point. I don't know. I feel like it's just something that we don't even want to think about, because if we think about it too much, it'll break our fucking minds. It'll break our brains. It'll make us go crazy. But it is a reality. You know
the weight of scientists.
Non-stick is probably safe. The factories aren't. A couple weeks ago, the U.S. Space Force accidentally dumped 700 gallons of fuel onto Haleakala Mountain on my home island of Maui, Hawaii. Yep. Anyway, let's look, though. We are not talking about any of this because it's something that impacts everyone. And it's not even fucking... Bro, this shit is so much a permanent fixture of our existence that rich people get this contamination too, for the record. Maybe they'll have better treatments down the line, but everyone's getting it. That's how capitalism works. Capital owners will sacrifice their children and even themselves for short-term benefits. They will then spend an entire lifetime trying to avoid the worst outcomes. But that's just how it works. Meanwhile, here's the culture war.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. When a party wins a new majority in Congress, generally what they want to do is hit the ground running. So far, the Republicans have not done that. After an interminable series of votes, historic, in fact, House Republicans did finally elect Kevin McCarthy Speaker of the House. And earlier this month, credit where due, they did manage to kick Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar off the Foreign Affairs.
Chris Hayes is the only motherfucker on MSNBC that's like, pretty good. I mean, I guess technically Mehdi Hasan is also on MSNBC, but Chris Hayes consistently doing diligent and good reporting and good commentary.
Committee for reasons they weren't really able to articulate. But apart from that, on issues of actual substance, they've got nothing to show for their majority. As the New York Times put it somewhat diplomatically, 6 weeks into the majority, Republican leaders have found themselves paralyzed on some of the biggest issues they promised to address as they pressed to win control of the House last year. More simply, you might say Republicans are in disarray. And it really shouldn't be this hard. This is governing on easy mode.
Chris is a bit of a Hasanabi head as well. But,
because Republicans only control the House while Democrats control the Senate and the White House. They don't even need to worry about passing something that could just become law. It's literally all just messaging bills. And they somehow can't even do that right. After running a midterm campaign on inflation and gas prices and crime, they've done nothing to even symbolically address those issues. Instead, they've turned Congress into the legislative branch of Fox News, holding these hearings about why their Twitter accounts were banned and promising to investigate why a TV provider dropped Newsmax. And yes, you can chalk a lot of this up to the personalities at issue, the kinds of people who excel in modern Republican politics, the fractiousness, the MAGA caucus calling the shots in a narrow majority. But that doesn't explain it all. I actually think there's something much deeper at play. I have a theory here. And an illustration of that theory in action is all on display right now in the reaction to the train derailment disaster in Ohio. So, as you've likely heard, as Mehdi covered on the program last night, train carrying chemicals, including a toxic flammable gas called vinyl chloride, derailed near the Ohio-Pennsylvania border earlier this month. That, in turn, started a fire, and then they had to do a sort of controlled release of some of those chemicals, which blanketed the town of East Palestine, Ohio, in noxious smoke. There are, as of today and continuing, really significant concerns about the accident leaving behind a lasting environmental disaster. And many residents of the town of East Palestine are complaining of health issues and, understandably, fearful about returning to their homes.
Some living in the area are still smelling strong chemical odors. Now they're demanding transparency about what toxins might be lurking in local creeks and in the atmosphere, how they could potentially impact the area in the future. The EPA says the village's water supply is safe. Residents are worried that homes with well water may be at risk. And residents say they want long-term testing with the results publicly posted.
When journalists in the New Republic interviewed people on the ground, including a woman whose family donned N95 masks and gloves before entering their contaminated home, only to find, quote, after leaving her eyes burned and itched, her throat was sore, she had a rash, her husband and both her sisters had migraines. Another woman who lives by the accident site, quote, has suffered from a sore throat while her 8-month-old baby has suffered respiratory issues. Now, after enormous public pressure, Norfolk Southern, which is the rail company that operated the train that derailed, announced a new round of financial assistance to benefit the impacted community today. But it's pretty clear that a lot more needs to be done for the people of East Palestine. And this is where we come to what I think is the sort of fundamental failure of the Republican Party right now. Because Republicans have had a lot to say about the incident. They've been talking about a lot. They've mostly been trying to score political points at the expense of the Biden administration. Marjorie Taylor Greene, current thought leader of the Republican Party, who voted against the bipartisan infrastructure bill last Congress, went on a somewhat bizarre Twitter rant where she seemed to blame pot-addled liberals for our crumbling institutions. Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance, fresh on the job, blamed the bipartisan infrastructure bill for not magically solving the problem of the train's derailment overnight.
We've had hundreds of train derailments after we spent over $1 trillion on infrastructure in this country. So the fact that this isn't getting obviously better is a major indictment of the people spending the money and what they're spending the money on.
Now, that bill passed in November 2021. That was the appropriation for the money. It hasn't been spent, right? And we have not been able to fix an entire nation's crumbling infrastructure in the intervening year, though it's not clear this was an infrastructure problem to begin with. Now, a number of Republicans have also come forward to blame Biden's high-profile transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg, including Florida Congressman Byron Donalds.
I don't even know why we take Pete Buttigieg seriously at this point. This man, the only reason he's in his job is because of his intersectionality. Let's just be honest about the situation.
Ironic for Representative Byron Donalds to say that, who was brought up as a speaker, potentially brought up for the speaker role, you know. Come on, man. You're a black Republican talking about intersectionality? Like, really? You're talking about, like, you know, come on, man. Jesus Christ.
He doesn't know what he's doing. He's actually been a terrible transportation secretary. I mean, look, when the supply chains were being blown up, the man wasn't even at work. Nobody missed him. Nobody even knew he was there.
He was on paternity leave when that happened for his child was born. Now, to be clear, Donalds is accusing Buttigieg of only getting his job because he's gay. It's a gross smear. But one right-wing podcaster took things a step further.
Buttigieg is out talking about how workers are too white. For the last couple of years, I have been warning about this crusade against white people, and people shrug their shoulders and say, oh, Charlie, why does that matter? I could tell you why it matters. When there's a crisis now and the leaders hate working class whites, they're not going to scramble to save your life. They'll lie to you and tell you to go back home.
It's just so fucking indecent that these right-wing psychopaths end up getting exactly what they wanted, which is deregulation, and then they look to the rubble of the chaos that they've caused and point to it again and say, this is happening because people don't care about you because you're fucking white. It's like, bro, that distinction was created so that this deregulation and the profit margins could remain as solidly profitable as possible. Like the original distinction of like, oh man, black people, white people, great replacement. Like that is a distraction. It's a distraction caused by right-wing racial propagandists. It's created with a specific purpose to get white working class people to not recognize that they are white working class people. Okay? Hyper focus on the white. Think that there's like very big distinctions in the way that like capital owners treat you from black people. Okay? And then you won't realize that they're taking money out of your pocket, that they're fucking you over.
While you're poisoned.
Oh, lie to you until you go back home when you're poisoned. Sure, that's never happened to black people in this country before. Yeah, let me just check on the history. Nope, definitely never happened.
Yeah, that's the other side of this story. Is like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, the government doesn't give a fuck about white people. Of course they don't give a fuck about black people. Like, a government that does not care about white people absolutely doesn't give a shit about black people, okay? This is a reality that also every black person understands. This is why, like, Black Lives Matter will go and protest police brutality against white people all the fucking time. Okay? They don't even give a fuck about poor white people. The entire thing is designed to fuck over black people. Of course they don't give a fuck about black people.
Okay. I'm cherry picking particularly ludicrous examples, but this is what they do. I mean, there's a real thing that happened, right? A very real thing. Real people really impacted by a real disaster. Tangible thing. Whenever there's a problem or a crisis, folks on the right got someone or some group that's out to get you. And maybe it's the openly gay Secretary of Transportation or a fictional cabal of woke elites conspiring against white people. And I get it. Republicans think this is a very sound rhetorical and political strategy. And I get why they're worked up about this issue. East Palestine is a very white, rural, working class place. It's the kind of town Donald Trump and Fox News tell you has been forgotten by woke elites. And when they say it's been forgotten and left behind, they're not entirely wrong. There's a real nugget of truth there. It's also true that Pete Buttigieg is the Secretary of Transportation, that he isn't the guy in charge of regulating the railroads. And legitimate good faith criticisms of his job performance, rather than his identity, are obviously completely fair game. When you're the administration, when you're the presidency.
It's kind of wild to hear this from an MSNBC commentator, by the way. I mean, MSDNC.
This is the stuff you got to answer for. There's a major train derailment on your watch. Okay, so far so good. There's a real problem, right? Pete Buttigieg really is the transportation secretary. But here's where all of a sudden it ends. Republicans can complain all they want, but what do you want to do? What do you want to do? They can't really offer any real solutions because in the end, this is a classic story about corporate interest and regulation. Big corporations like the railroad companies, Norfolk Southern, and the chemical companies whose chemicals they transport have every monetary incentive under shareholder capitalism to keep regulation light, right? So their costs stay low. And then if something goes bad, they can externalize the costs of disasters like this, right? The government, in turn, has a responsibility to push regulation anyway to prevent the burden of disasters like this falling on regular folks like those in the town of East Palestine. For liberals like myself, this is all a pretty clear story. The solutions here are pretty clear. We should probably have better regulation and stronger worker power. Here's one example, right? For instance, there was an Obama-era train braking rule specifically for cars carrying flammable materials. They had to upgrade their braking. That was eliminated under Donald Trump, although he was eliminated with an assist from a small provision in a 2015 bill passed by Congress and, signed by Obama, that the train corporations had lobbied for that had kind of challenged and watered down the regulation. Now, in this case, it wasn't the braking, we think. There was a fire on the train before it derailed. But again, that's the kind of prudential safety regulation you want to look at. Like, okay, maybe we need to upgrade safety regulatory standards on train cars like this. You can also make polluters pay for the cleanup costs of disasters caused by their products and services, like the Superfund site situation. Okay, again, these are just two straightforward answers, policy answers, that will make people's lives tangibly better or at least address the problem. But here's the thing. Contemporary conservatives in the Republican Party can't offer those types of solutions. Can they say, you know what? We need to regulate the railroad companies. No. Are they going to say that? Let's stick it to the greedy companies, soak the rich. They can't do that.
Yeah, which is why they turned the conversation back on like, oh, they don't care about you because you're white. No, motherfucker, they don't care about you because you're poor. Okay? They want you to remain poor so they can continue to not care about you.
That's what libs want to do. Conservatives are not ideologically disposed to those types of ampers. More importantly, the entire superstructure of Republican politics, including their donors, won't let them do it. No matter how much lip service they pay to regular working folks on their various podcasts, the Republican Party is fundamentally, when the chips are down, when it's time for the rubber to hit the road, when it's time to govern, beholden to the rich and corporate interests. And there are conservatives watching this right now who will see this clip who will agree with me. I promise you. Here's example number one, Kevin McCarthy, the new Speaker of the House, top Republican in the country, essentially letting his buddy, Jeff Miller, who's like a top corporate lobbyist, basically help run the party. The guy was like running the war room behind his speaker vote. And again, this isn't a question.
Educate yourself on how the left Congress and Biden voted to keep union workers quiet about this very issue a few months ago. I love the gall of a random Twitch chatter coming in here and telling me to educate myself as though I haven't been shitting on the Democratic Party non-fucking stop on that particular issue. Specifically, for months before this train derailment happened. He said left Congress. Okay, carry on then. Like, the attitude from this random dickhead. Like, why don't you fucking Google it, dipshit? Why don't you just search on YouTube what my thoughts are about the railroad unions and my coverage on it? Probably an LSF chatter. A comment saying you did the opposite got giga upvoted. Wait, what? People. All right, let's get into some labor union. People just make shit up about me now. Is that what it is? They just, I mean, they always do, but like they just say the exact opposite of what I actually have been advocating for? Is that what it is? It's way easier to assume what you think and attack that, though. Oh, by the way, update on this issue. Full sellout from the White House for the majority of rail workers. I don't understand. I've done numerous videos on this. I don't even bother finding hate comments anymore because they just attract straw man. They just attack straw man arguments. That's crazy. Why do other people just like, instead of coming here or instead of like legitimately looking for the truth themselves, just go off of that? One from 2 months ago, one from 4 months ago. Video title does make it seem like you're defending. Yeah, when I said Joe Biden is a traitor, has sided with railroad companies to stop a worker strike from happening after the workers not agreed to the tentative agreement. That does probably, I haven't used strong enough language for them to understand, I think. You read out a message of mine where I said I'm in the hater communities to see what they're saying a while ago. And yeah, they've been getting wilder recently. Like, what the fuck are they saying now? They just like, they literally just, I guess they just have decided they'll make up things that are the exact opposite when like the information is readily available. At least back in the day, they would try to clip some shit. At least back in the day, they would try to clip some shit that made it seem like I was saying the exact opposite of what I'm actually saying. Now, they just like don't even look at that. From allies, supposedly allies and haters alike, too. Anyway, let's continue.
Of rhetoric. It's not a question of like sound bites and all that stuff. Politics is about interests and power and who the government helps and who it hurts and what it does. So what do Republicans really care about? There's a record here. What do they do when they had power? Well, they had a trifecta. They had the White House and the House and Senate, and they tried to repeal Obamacare, which, by the way, would have absolutely screwed over white working class voters. Their repeal plan. Even Tucker Carlson, the fake populist, frozen food heir, called Trump out for it.
This bill has as one of its centerpieces a tax cut for investors that would primarily benefit people making over $250,000 a year. Already done pretty well in the past 10 years, as you know.
Yeah.
A Bloomberg analysis showed that counties that voted for you, middle class and working class counties, would do far less well under this bill than the counties that voted for Hillary, the more affluent counties.
I know.
It seems like maybe this isn't consistent with the message of the last election.
No, a lot of things aren't consistent.
Perfect. You ran on, we're going to screw over the we're going to go after the globalists and Hillary Clinton, the WikiLeaks, and we're going to help you. But now you're passing a tax cut for rich people and screwing over the you in that? I don't get it. Yeah, you have just put your finger on the contradiction at the heart of it all. Now, Obamacare repeal failed. So Republicans then moved on to Plan B. Again, what do you want to do with power? And it was the biggest tax cut since Ronald Reagan. They slashed the corporate tax rate. That's what they want to do. That was about it. That was the extent of the governing agenda. That's the problem with the modern Republican Party. Who they are, who they claim to be are fundamentally at odds. Because it's true, their base increasingly is rural working class voters. Folks who have real material needs, like the people in East Palestine who can't get into their home, that need to be met. But all they can offer them is culture war nonsense. The problem is your transportation secretary is gay. Because their corporate masters won't let them do anything to take on the big corporations or help workers or organize labor. And so what you get a lot of tweets. You got a page on the House Republican website advertising all their members' various podcasts. You can listen to all their podcasts. Look at that. They've all got podcasts. Good for them. On those podcasts, they rail against the liberal elites. But what you do not get is any real solution for actual real people.
Yeah, nobody wants to work anymore. Everyone wants to be a fucking influencer. You know what I mean? The only difference between like my rhetoric and Chris Hayes' rhetoric is that like he obviously doesn't have the same liberties that I do, editorially speaking, to just like straight up be like, yeah, Pete Buttigieg sucks. Like straight up. Pete Buttigieg is, of course, a corporate slave. That's how he got to the position that he got to, by being a rabid attack dog for corporations, by working as a consultant. Everybody knows what that means, you know? And that Democrats also are not necessarily as powerless as they claim that they are in the face of this kind of oligarchy that they have also designed alongside the Republicans. Rail workers say they knew the train that derailed in East Palestine was dangerous. A freight train carrying toxic chemicals derailed 50 miles outside of Pittsburgh, forced thousands to evacuate, and created a toxic cloud. Workers knew the train has safety issues. Norfolk Southern Train 32N derailed just outside of East Palestine, Ohio, 50 miles northwest of Pittsburgh. 38 of the train's 150 cars plowed into each other and thundered to the ground. Some of the cars then burst into flames, and the flames damaged another 12 cars. Of the dozens of derailed cars, 5 were tankers containing vinyl chloride. We already know, an industrial chemical used to make hard plastic. Breathing in vinyl chloride is not good. It is carcinogen. Is a cancer-inducing chemical. Initially, the tankers containing the vinyl chloride did their jobs, protecting the dangerous chemical from leaking. But a rapid temperature change made the Norfolk Southern worried the tankers wouldn't hold, which would produce a massive explosion and release the known carcinogen into the air and ground just outside of a town where thousands of people live. Carcinogenic is what I was going to say, but fucked it up. They chose to burn it instead, creating a giant smoke cloud that rose in the high air. It's too early to say what the long-term impact is, if any, of 32N's derailment will be, but it's also too early to say what caused 32N to go off the rails. But it was not a surprise to some people who worked for Norfolk Southern. They have been warning that something like this, or even much worse, was inevitable. Motherboard has been reporting on the freight train rail industry for 2 years, during which time we have interviewed dozens of Norfolk Southern employees across the company's service area about how to change the management philosophy that has made working conditions worse and jeopardized safety in exchange for supposed gains in efficiency. Motherboard has previously reported on many of the details about the company's safety practices. In the past week, Motherboard also interviewed 2 workers with a direct knowledge of 32N. Those 2 workers have provided additional details about 32N included in the story that shed light to the train's reputation in the months before its derailment. As previous reporting on the freight rail industry, Motherboard is not revealing the names, obviously. For years, NS, like several other major freight rail companies, has prioritized moving trains as quickly as possible out of terminals and rail yards over safety as a part of a wider move across the freight railroad industry towards management philosophy called precision scheduled railroading, which is intended to move more freight for lower costs. Safety inspection times and personnel have been slashed, hindering efforts to ensure trains are safe. Crews are dissuaded from reporting safety issues. Workers that persist in raising red flags are often ignored. Norfolk Southern spokesperson Jeff DeGraff previously told Motherboard for a story on the safety impacts of PSR in 2021, Norfolk Southern is firmly committed to all levels of operating safely, protecting our employees and the communities that we serve. So here's a question. Or not a question, sorry. 2 years ago, SMART, a transportation union, President Jeremy Ferguson, warned your publication and anyone that would listen that something like this was going to happen, as I also covered extensively when the railroad union talks were happening before Joe Biden eviscerated the conversation through executive order. One of the Norfolk Southern employees Motherboard spoke to this week said, or not through executive order, but through urging Congress to quickly end this conversation. They're going to keep happening if regulators continue to allow this business model to ravage our nation's freight rail system in the pursuit of profit. My fear is that these corporations have so much money and political influence that nothing is going to change. And yeah, nothing is going to change. Over the past several years, Motherboard has reported that Norfolk Southern's lax safety practices have been applied to its entire network, reflecting a trend happening across the freight rail industry. But two workers Motherboard spoke to this week said 32N in particular was a known safety risk. Like airline flight numbers, railroads assign the same train number to different physical trains that run the same routes on a repetitive schedule. 32N, which travels from outside St. Louis to the edge of Pittsburgh, has a reputation. On the run that ended abruptly on the outskirts of East Palestine, multiple red flags, including two mechanical problems, about 32N went undetected or were ignored in the hours leading up to the crash, according to the two workers familiar with the train. These red flags were especially concerning, said the workers, because 32N is widely known among workers as a difficult train to run, not because of especially difficult terrain or equipment, but as a result of management decisions about how the train should be put together. As a result, 32N has a nickname among some rail workers. It's common for trains to have nicknames in the railroad industry, but as one worker told Motherboard, the nicknames are given for a reason. They called this one 32 Nasty. In a statement, Norfolk Southern spokesperson Connor Spielmaker told Motherboard that assigning a reputation to a train that fluctuates by thousands of tons on a regular basis is inaccurate, and that whatever the size of this particular run of 32N, it used to be bigger. More importantly, this train previously ran as a longer and heavier train before being split into two shorter, lighter trains in the past few months as a part of a regular review of our network plan, where we adjusted a significant number of our trains and their schedules. Spielmaker also disputed the assertion that the train's weight was unevenly distributed, calling it false because the weight was uniform throughout. I work for a passenger railroad. This is years of deferred maintenance on tracks and train cars and maximizing train sets beyond what they should carry. Pair that with smaller train crews. It's capitalism working as intended, with the poor bearing the consequence. Yeah. I like that this actually kind of reads as a threat, by the way, where they're basically saying, trust me, it could have been even worse than this. Like, there were more train cars, okay? There was more weight. Like, you should be lucky that only 32 out of the 150 cars were leaking contaminants, okay? Could have been even more than 150. You know, fuck yourself. The Ohio National Guard, 3 days after the derailment, as well as the governors in Ohio, Pennsylvania, forced 1,000 people from the town and surrounding areas to evacuate. They did a controlled release of the tankers. This involved blowing holes in the tankers, leaking the vinyl chloride into a trench, and setting it on fire. The operation created a gigantic smoke cloud that garnered apocalyptic comparisons. People took photos of it from the airplane, not realizing what the fuck it was. Here's one. There's even a scarier one that I saw on Reddit. Officials warned, according to the AP, the controlled burn would send phosphogene and hydrogen chloride into the air. Phosgene was one of the several toxic chemicals used in World War I as a chemical weapon. Hydrogen chloride has strict exposure limits because the overexposure can result in chemical burns, respiratory failure, and death. Does anyone have the other picture? Authorities insisted the operation... Oh, here it is. Yeah, look at this shit, dude. Looking like a Chatter's mom. Just a gaping black hole. That was uncalled for. Unfollowed. Anyway, let's continue. Looks like an oil spill in the sky. Yeah. Interesting way of putting it. On. Second, I gotta do something here. I've talked to crews in the other areas who know of this train, said Clyde Whitaker, the Ohio State Legislative Board Director for Smart Transportation, a rail worker union who specializes in safety issues, referring to 32N. It is a notorious train. 2021, Motherboard reported there was an increasing likelihood of a catastrophic freight train derailment due to the implementation of precision scheduled railroading, a management philosophy. Its defenders argue uses technology to improve efficiency, but workers say is a euphemism for draconian staff cuts, lax safety practices, and slash maintenance to pad corporate profits. Norfolk Southern was not the first nor the only freight rail company to implement PSR. I urge you to understand that this is not the only freight train that is impacted by this. Whenever people talk about precision, whenever people talk about efficiency, understand that what they are talking about is cutting corners, okay? Efficiency and precision is capitalist speak for cutting corners and reducing the number of staff members, and cutting corners in the form of like basically getting away with whatever the fuck they can by not improving safety standards. You just know the McKinsey ghouls were behind the efficiency measures? Yeah. I mean, probably. It's not, that's the least surprising thing out of this story. Norfolk Southern announced the implementation of PSR in February 2019, promising investors it would increase its operating ratio, how much it spends to run trains as a percentage of how much it makes running trains, by more than 5% in 2 years. It would do that in part by reducing its workforce by a minimum of 3,000 people. I can't recall. What was it that I covered 4 months ago and then another 2 months ago about the rail workers unions and what they were frustrated by? I just can't remember. Oh, that's right. They wanted to hire more people. Oh, well. Under PSR, the industry as a whole has slashed its workforce by more than a third in less than 6 years, according to data collected by the Surface Transportation Board. As Motherboard reported in 2021, across the different crafts, workers highlighted the same general problem in the push for efficiency. Fewer workers are being tasked with more, rushed through safety-critical inspections and repairs, and are pressured not to report defects or potential safety issues that will take cars out of service and require manpower to fix. At the time, the spokesperson told Motherboard, our comprehensive approach mirrors that of freight railroad industry, including significant private investment, employee training efforts, technology implementation, regular inspections and community outreach, which has led to dramatic safety improvements over the past 2 decades with respect to train accidents and employee injuries. The warnings expressed by industry insiders and motherboards reporting, congressional hearings, proposed regulation change comments, and other forums have not changed working conditions for rail workers. The House Transportation Committee requested the Government Accountability Office study the issue, which has no regulatory power, resulting in a 57-page report published at the end of last year. The report did little more than summarize existing talking points. Whew. Anyway, that's what it is. It is what it is. Everyone knew about it. The people that knew about it, the people that knew about this problem that was going to inevitably happen and will continue to happen, raised the alarm bells numerous times. They did it in a very public manner as well. Okay? This is just like many other hidden industries that are responsible for our day-to-day existence, a very difficult fucking task, okay? But it's also a necessity. You have to have railroads. You have to have railroads carry toxic chemicals, okay? And sometimes derailments are going to happen. But the goal of the regulatory body is to ensure that the damage is minimized, just like what we talked about in Turkey. You know these things are going to happen. You know accidents are going to happen. Your goal is to minimize human error. Your goal is to ensure that even if accidents do happen, that the damage is softened. But of course, all of those things can be considered redundancies. Okay? Redundancies, however, save lives. And they want to do that in every aspect of our lives. They want to do that in commercial aviation, not just transportation, but like human beings flying on planes. They want to go after every facet because ultimately, profit rates have a tendency to decline. And when that happens, you got to find new ways of generating profit because profits have to keep going up, even though it doesn't want to. It can't. So how do you do that? By slowly but surely monopolizing sectors and inevitably raising costs or raising the prices, or reducing redundancies. Redundancies that were put in place and inked in blood as a consequence of regulations that were put forward when people died prior to a lack of such regulation. This is how this works. This is why I always say, all matter of rules and regulation is written in blood. But we just keep going back to that. Keep going back to that because, you know, the profit gods, we are beholden to them. The only way to stop that is by creating stronger labor protections and allowing the labor unions to, you know, advocate for best safety practices because they know better. They know better than the executives always. This is yet another great example. People always say like, oh, labor unions, you're giving too much power to the workers. What the fuck do the workers know, right? Well, there you go. They knew about this. They talked about this, and it fell on deaf ears. And this is just one issue. This is just one of the normal aspects of living in the United States of America, okay? That's why Norfolk Southern thought they could get away with paying $25,000 and moving on. Because it's not even as bad or as public as like other train derailments that end up killing people with explosions or with, trains actually with impact. And that's it, because they do get away with it. It's no different than the 5 cops in the Scorpion unit that brutally executed with their bare hands Tyree Nichols. They were on camera talking shit. They didn't think they were going to get punished because that is the normal standard operations. That's business as usual. So they didn't even think that they would get in trouble for it. You know?